Hello, everyone. I was asked to explain a bit more about the difference between subordinating and coordinating conjunctions, excuse me. So I'm going to talk for a moment about subordinating conjunctions. So subordinating, it refers to the fact that there are complete ideas and incomplete ideas. So I talked about this a bit previously. Incomplete ideas are ones that they're either missing a subject or a verb or both. Whatever they do have, they don't make sense on their own. That's a dependent clause, also known as a subordinate clause. To be subordinate means to be reliant on something stronger. So a subordinate clause or dependent clause relies on a complete thought in order for that dependent or subordinate clause to make sense. So a complete thought, also called an independent clause, or sometimes the main clause, that is what the subordinate clause needs to make sense of itself. An independent thought, again, independent thought or main clause, or complete thought. These are sentences that have a subject. The subject is some noun that's doing an action. They have a verb. Verbs we haven't talked about yet, but those are actions or possession. And then logic. It has to make sense. Whatever the subject is doing, it's clear, it makes sense, there are no questions left. So I'm going to go through a few examples of different subordinating conjunctions of sentences with subordinating conjunctions, and I'll explain for each sentence, for each example, what is the subordinate or dependent clause, what is the independent clause or complete thought, and then within that subordinate or dependent clause, you can call it either one, subordinate clause, dependent clause, we're going to identify the conjunctions. So this first example here, after going to bed, I tossed and turned all night. So let's just first look for the complete thought. After going to bed, what? What happened after going to bed? This is not a complete thought because we don't know. I tossed and turned all night. Well, that actually answers the question here of what happened after going to bed. This idea needs this idea in order to make sense. This idea here, I tossed and turned all night, that's the independent thought. That's the independent clause or complete thought, excuse me. It has a subject, I. What was I doing? Tossing and turning. I tossed and turned. And how long or when did I toss and turn? All night. This is the logic part. So here, the subordinate clause, remember the one that is dependent on another idea to make sense of itself, is right here, after going to bed. After is the conjunction, the word that connects this whole subordinate clause, going to bed, to the independent clause, I tossed and turned all night. So a subordinating conjunction is different than a coordinating conjunction, and that a subordinating conjunction is one that's connecting an incomplete idea, again, a subordinate dependent idea like this, to a complete idea, an independent clause like this. Let's look at the next example here, since. Since last week, I've had a hard time sleeping. So this first part, since last week, it doesn't have a subject, it doesn't have a verb, and it doesn't make sense on its own. That tells us it is a subordinate or dependent clause, because it doesn't have any of those key ingredients for a complete thought. Since last week, what has been happening since last week? If we look at the rest of the sentence, we get the answer. I've had a hard time sleeping. This is a complete thought. I have had, I is the subject, have had, I've is a contraction of I have. I have had what? A hard time sleeping. So we have subject, we have verb, and we have logic. Again, this thought does not have subject, does not have verb, does not have logic. So it's not a complete thought. It is a subordinate. That is a dependent thought, which means that this word here, since, it's connecting last week to I've had a hard time sleeping. Since is our subordinating conjunction. Remember, conjunctions are words, phrases that connect ideas to other ideas. In this case, a subordinate idea to a complete, independent idea. Let's look at another example. Although tired, I had to get up early for work. Although tired, I had to get up early for work. So let's just look at the first part. Although tired, what? Who was tired? What was tired? What happened even though somebody was tired? We don't have any information here. So this idea cannot possibly be independent, cannot possibly stand on its own. It has to rest on this other part of the sentence. I had to get up early for work. I is the subject. Had to get up is our verb phrase. Had to get up for what? Early. I had to get up early, or so when, early, and for what? For work. So we have subject, we have verb, and we have logic, all of which helps us understand this. So this highlighted phrase, although tired, that's our subordinate clause. Although is our subordinating conjunction that connects tired to the rest of the idea. How does tired matter? What does it relate to? Oh, the fact that I have to get up anyway. Doesn't matter if I'm tired. All right. We're going to have a couple more examples here. So because is a super common conjunction, and it can actually be used as a subordinating or a coordinating conjunction. But in this example, so it's all based on context. In this example, it's subordinating. Because of my tiredness, I nearly overslept once or twice. So let's just look at the first part. Because of my tiredness. Okay, so we have at least a noun, tiredness, and a pronoun, my tiredness, but we have no idea what's being done, what's happened because of my tiredness. So this is not a complete idea. That means it is a subordinate, aka dependent clause. It depends on another idea to make sense. This idea, in fact. I nearly overslept once or twice. I is the subject. Overslept is the verb. Overslept when or how? Nearly. How often? Once or twice. So we've got subject, verb, and logic. All of which helps us understand the relevance of my tiredness. So because is that subordinating conjunction here. All right. We're going to go through two more examples. This is getting to be kind of a long video. So another coordinating conjunction is that, especially when it's paired with so. So that, or in order that. All right, so let's read this sentence. I have decided to go to bed earlier so that I will be able to wake up more easily. All right, now in this case, the first part of this sentence, it has some things that our other examples didn't. There is a subject, I. There is a verb, have decided. Have decided what? To go to bed earlier. But it doesn't answer the question of why. So part of the logic, what's missing here is the logic of the statement. What is the relevance of it? We still only understand the relevance of I have decided to go to bed earlier by looking at this other complete idea. So although this phrase, I have decided to go to bed earlier, although it has subject, verb, most of what makes a complete thought, it's still dependent on this thought. Why have I decided to go to bed earlier? Oh, it's so that, again, it's so that I will be able to wake up more easily. So here, so that, with the focus on that, is our subordinating conjunction. It's showing that, again, this thought relies on this thought to make complete sense. All right, so our last example here. If not for my alarm, I would not always wake up on time. So this is incomplete, aka subordinate, aka dependent, because we don't know what's happening if not for my alarm. If not for my alarm, what? Well, if not for my alarm, I would not always wake up on time. Again, this is our complete thought, our independent clause. I as our subject, would not wake up is our verb phrase. Would not wake up when? Always. Would not wake up how? On time. So again, this is our independent thought on which this dependent or subordinate thought relies to make sense. All right, and folks, there's just this list here just has a few other common subordinating conjunctions. You won't always see all of them all the time, but it's a good idea to start becoming familiar, just so like you know when you see these words, there's a chance there might be a subordinating conjunction going on. So these phrases include as far as, even though, whenever, while, before, after, in order that or in order to, unless, whether, until, lest, provided, though, as long as, and between. All right, so folks, I hope this clears up the difference between subordinating and coordinating conjunctions. Again, subordinating conjunctions connect subordinate clauses, that is dependent clauses, aka incomplete thoughts, to independent clauses, that is complete thoughts. On the other hand, a coordinating conjunction is one that generally will be connecting a complete thought to a complete thought. So, for instance, instead of after going to bed, I tossed and turned all night, it would be I went to bed, comma, and I tossed and turned all night. I went to bed is a complete thought. I is the subject. Went is the verb. Went where? To bed. Complete thought. I tossed and turned all night, we already know is a complete thought I've explained previously. I is the subject, tossed and turned is the verb phrase, tossed and turned where or when? All night. So again, coordinating conjunctions connect complete thoughts. Subordinating conjunctions connect an incomplete thought to a complete thought. All right, folks, if we do have any other questions, please feel free to reach out.